All right, welcome everyone to the MITSC meeting for July 10, 2024. And we'll get the meeting started. And we'll start with the honor to the creator before we begin. Women to get you estimate. Million and Pemkis got promotion wagon. You got million and to Jibuli na walk. And we go to good. And we does a skate commit. You came in there, the Gijini Westman. City when Gizaman, I get a graduate, but you came on. Meet with Haman, now me, Nick on the Aldo dated. Oh, thanks everyone. And we'll start out with introductions. New Louis, National Party MITSC, Chair of the Commission.
Joey Barnes, past party representative of Union Township.
Katie Donlin, grad student interested in learning about tribal state.
I'm Robert Checkaway. I'm a state member appointee and I live in Freeport.
Rachel Bell, staff member with MITSC. I'm the projects coordinator.
Morning, Jill Tompkins. I'm the executive director of MITSC and I'm a Penobscot tribal member.
And on the screen,
Sam St. John, commissioner with the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians.
I'm Z. Croft McDonald. I'm the other commissioner from the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians.
Karen Rank.
I'm Bert.
Oh no, sorry. Elders first, Bert. Go ahead.
I'm Bert Polchis. I'm one of the commissioners appointed by the Penobscot Nation.
I'm Darren Rank. I'm the other commissioner from Penobscot Nation.
guests. Oh, Rena.
Hey, good morning. I'm Rena Newell, newly appointed. I'm representing Sabayak, Passamaquoddy tribe. Good to be with all of you. I had some technical difficulties at the admin building, so I relocated to my kitchen at home. So I'm glad I caught you all during introductions. Thank you.
Yes, and I'd just like to extend our welcome to you as well from MITSC. Glad to have you aboard, and got a nice letter from Chief Bassett.
To Williwan, definitely want to say a thank you, Williwan, to Sandy Yummel, who was previously seated, and I'll be taking up her seat. So it's good to be with all of you.
Awesome. Lou and Rena.
Williwan.
I'll go. I'm Mullian Bryant, Penobscot Nation Tribal Ambassador. Thanks for inviting us to join you today.
And I'm Toy McGrath. I'm with Drummond Woodsum, and I work with the Wabanaki Alliance and tangentially the tribes as well when it comes to legislative matters.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rafi Hopkins. I work with MITSC. I'm a consultant who does strategic website and communications. Glad to be here. It's nice to see you all.
And everyone? Oh.
I'm sorry, my apologies. Is this the, yeah, Rachel Talbot Ross, I serve as Speaker of the House. I want to thank you for the invitation to join you today.
Morning, everyone. I want to share that Chief Sabatis will be joining us as well. She'll be joining in person, and she's on her way right now.
Oh, great. Thanks, Zeke. All right, so we're going to start out with the agenda. And review of the agenda and a quorum check as well. We have one missing. Oh, wait, we have two missing, yes? Oh, no, one. Nels from the state. But we do not have a quorum today. But we'll continue on with updates and MITSC business as usual. Does everyone have a chance to look at the agenda and agree? And if we want to have any additions or changes? We're good, thank you. We invited some guests as well. And I think well, Clarissa is coming. William is here. Zeke is here. This is here already. All right, so we're going to start out with the legislative update or overview. Reviewing bills and new initiatives. Started with the questions. So we have some questions for the legislative people as well. So I'll read that first one. To the legislative. Well, welcome Chief Sabatis as well to our meeting. How are you? I'm very well. How are you doing? You're doing funny. Great timing. So to the legislative folks out there, what is your impressions of the outcomes of the tribally supported bills in the 131st legislature? Was it a success? Was it disappointing? What, if anything, would you recommend be done differently next session? And we could start with, maybe we'll start with Mullion and Zeke and then Rachel and Toby.
Thanks, Newell. So I think looking at the last session on paper, we should feel good about a lot of it. I think LD 2007 being passed into law is a really important restoration of some sovereignty and self-determination for our tribal courts. If you look back on the Harvard report that we had done a few years back, one of the, if not the biggest indicator for success in tribal communities was a well-functioning tribal court and having those sort of powers in our jurisdictional wheelhouses. So I think that wasn't a small feat for sure. Getting the governor on board, issues like that a lot of times can trigger her lawyer side, I think. So looking at courts and jurisdiction, historically she's been sort of tough to negotiate with on things like that. So really thankful that we got that passed. Thankful for Speaker Talbot Ross for helping us, every step of the way on that. I know we had gone in sort of looking at this more broadly and really wanting more of those task force recommendations and narrowing the focus to what we thought we could get done in a good way. And I think we accomplished that. We also were able to get the bill done for MITSC that should hopefully help you all out. And thankfully at Penobscot Tribal General Meeting, we were able to certify these laws in a timely way. So that's an improvement on our end and in that collaborative process with the state. I think that we're still in this posture of the reality of Governor Mills having some barriers around some of the things we really want, the access to federal Indian law, more of those task force recommendations. So I think heading into the next session, tribal leaders will really need to huddle up and think about what we can realistically get done in these next 2 years and how we do that strategically. And then I would love for us all to be thinking beyond these next 2 years and sort of our possibilities in a new administration. So that's where I'm at today.
Thank you, Mulligan. And I apologize, I'm in a room and I have two giant screens in front of me and one behind me, so I'm not sure where I'm looking. But I see
worries.
the speakers are highlighted when they talk, so thanks for that. Zeke,
Hey, thanks, Newell. I would just reiterate a lot of the same of what Ambassador Brian just shared as well. In terms of where the Holton Band is at in the certifications, I can share that we certified LD 1835 in one of our previous council sessions, and we are on path to do the same with 2007, though. Chief Sabatis, you might be able to update me as well. Have we finished that process yet? Or I know we're close.
I think the only issue is just having the people there that want to be part of that vote. So, I mean, it's not going to be an issue. It's just really logistic stuff. So hopefully we can have everything by our next meeting.
Yep, and that's pretty much all the updates I have.
Wrong. That I'm not legislative, but.
no, hey, please.
I'm down there.
You are here and we're grateful.
No, I mean, as much as I think ideally we would love to just see everything changed and done and fixed. I think that we definitely should be celebrating the successes that we've had this session. Especially, I think, in the atmosphere that we were in, because it definitely wasn't the same as even the first part of the biennium. I didn't feel we had the champions that we've had. We didn't have the same participation on both sides of the aisle as we'd had previous to this, past session. So I still think that what's going on, even though it's incremental changes, it's that we should be celebrating all of these successes. I'm happy with that. I do think that there is a lot that's I'm hopeful that after this year, we might see a little less resistance to some things that really just make sense for the state. I think that we've had better luck. I think everybody knows with the legislature opposed to working with the governor over the last so many years. So I'm anxious to see
Steps forward, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. Rachel.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, sorry. Madam Speaker, can you hear us? And if you are speaking, you are muted. All right, so how about Toby?
Sure. Thank you very much. I concur with what the chief and the ambassador said. I also look at this as not just second session, but the full session. So for instance, looking at success of, the speaker's bill when it came to ensuring that provisions of the Constitution are printed that outline the treaties, and then winning the referendum last November is important. I think the other bill was LD 229, which was, you all do like Penobscot, Pasquatti, training of your public safety folks, and then they go and get poached by other municipalities. And other municipalities have to reimburse other municipalities when they invest that into the training of police officers and whatnot. And so, you know, the bill was passed to say, hey, this now includes the tribes as well. So if a police officer is trained and then moves on, so that they get to get reimbursed as well from that municipality for the investment they made into that police officer. So I think that was also, you know, these are steps that we're taking forward. Slower. It's not, you know, progress isn't as swift as we'd like. I also say moving forward, I would highlight that I think there's an opportunity to, instead of look at one large omnibus bill, and this is just me saying this, you know, the chiefs, I think, have to decide on this and say what they want to come up with for next session. But the idea of, you know, taking the task force recommendations and taking 4 or 5 of them and putting them as individual pieces of legislation instead of an omnibus bill might be helpful because at the legislature, you know, when we have these omnibus bills, legislators don't understand them as well, even on the committee. Sometimes, even though they put copious amounts of time in, they wrapping their mind around every piece of a large omnibus bill is difficult sometimes in the time frame. Whereas if we're able to take, you know, and you know, this is just an example, it's not what I'm recommending, you know, eminent domain provision, right? Like I think Republicans and Democrats get around that where the government can't take tribal lands by eminent domain. Or, you know, do we talk about civil courts and, you know, have those negotiations? So we're dealing with one piece of legislation at a time instead of within the omnibus bill. But again, I think that's something the chiefs have to get together on and decide where they want to go moving forward.
Thank you, Joby. And Madam Speaker Talbot Ross, if you are still with us. Chance. Okay, so I'm going to move down to the MITSC commissioners as well. If anyone would like to speak, I know Robert has.
Yes, if I can ask a jumble of questions at once. My first was going to be, do you expect a new omnibus bill like the old 1626, or is it too early to even ask that? Second one is an easy one. When does the session start? Third one, how do these drafts get negotiated? I have the impression that there's a swirl of activity in the committee, Judiciary Committee, and governor comes in only after the legislative work is done. Guessing right or wrong? Speaker's back.
Okay, so we'll hold that question and we'll move to Madam Speaker for any comments that she might have.
So thank you. My apologies. I'm here in my office and we got word that there are some folks around who may not have our best interest in heart. So just taking some cautionary steps. So just general feedback about the past session, I think is the question. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. You know, it's so easy. I think I heard some folks say it's so easy to concentrate on the things we didn't get done. And I appreciate Ambassador Bryant for naming what I think is a very significant step around tribal courts. And so I tend to think of the things that we were able to get done. And the number one kind of way that I think about it is in terms of the extremely hostile environment in which we were able to get it done. You know, you're talking about a legislature that in many ways the 131st can be defined in terms of all of the violent toxicity that was ever present in trying to get work done. I mean, this is a legislature that had to censure 2 House reps for the first time in decades because they were trying to use the House floor in ways that shut people down, very violent ways. And so I just think that the legislation that we were able to get forward, move forward in such very difficult, and I use the word violent, atmosphere, is a testimony to each and every one of you and all of the hard work by the ambassador and the tribal chiefs, the alliance, and the citizens who showed up and testified. So I'm very proud of the work that we were able to get done. There are some things that I think two areas that I think I'd like to put out there, and one is we introduced a bill that was really based off of thinking about a constitutional office, a constitutional officer. That idea, I think, has been circulating for quite a while, and given who's in the Blaine House, that didn't seem like a laudable effort these past 2 years, and so we thought about creating kind of an interim step on the pathway to a constitutional officer position by creating an Office of Tribal State Affairs. I am not sure if that's part of the consideration moving forward, but we saw it working hand in hand with MITSC to try to have a less of a session voice and more of a year-round voice in shaping public policy and in educating the public on tribal state affairs, that it would have a year-round, focus, not this intermittent focus. You start, you stop, you start, you stop. But that it would be able to work with the MITSC and other entities, the Alliance, and keeping a year-round focus on relationships and tribal state affairs. So I don't know if that's part of the consideration, but just wanted to give you the context, as I had always understood it as a means in which to move forward in thinking about more of a constitutional officer. This tribal state office would help with that. And so other kinds of things to move forward, certainly you go back to the 22 recommendations. And I also want to say that it's very difficult to think about the piecemeal approach. I know that this is not the way in which the restoration of sovereignty should happen. I know that it feels to all involved as a way of moving forward that yields very little results at great high cost and resources. But I think concentrating on those, how in the next 2 years with this governor, what the effort might look like, and not knowing how the national presidential election is going to impact the majorities in the House and the Senate, given the state of affairs right now with the Democratic Party. I think just knowing to what extent we put more resources into the effort at the state level is a question that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. MITSC would also like to thank you for your leadership and support over the past as well. Thank you very much. So we'll continue on with this question, and I think Bob can reiterate concerns or questions that you had over this topic.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My couple of questions are, one, do you expect another omnibus bill like 1626, and I think it was 129 legislature? When does the session start, and how did the negotiations move between proponents and Judiciary Committee and the Blaine House in particular? Does the governor's office get involved only after everything else is pretty well set? Anybody?
So does somebody know the answer to those questions?
Well, let me take a crack at it. When it comes down to omnibus bill, obviously we can't say legislators, don't put things in. So someone may do that. But like I said, I think it's up to the chiefs to decide if they want to do an omnibus bill or come in with specific broken up individual legislation based off the task force. I mean, the reality is if you take the omnibus bill, you can just take sections out and make them individual pieces of legislation. But that's something that I think the chiefs have to decide what they want to do. Session starts the first week in January. I mean, technically it's December, but that's organizational stuff and things of that nature. But like public hearings and whatnot will be January. And cloture to put in a bill. I mean, it's been anywhere. I mean, Madam Speaker, from this, it depends on the presiding officers, but it's been anywhere from mid-November to the week before, January, December 28th. So it's probably going to be somewhere within that first week of December or something like that. And then how they get negotiated, I think that's a very it's depending on the legislation. Sometimes it is the Attorney General's office and the tribal attorneys and the Speaker's office are having meetings going on. Sometimes when you have legislation like the gaming legislation, people interject themselves at the legislative process in the public hearing, the work session, and then you kind of pop out in between the public hearing and the work session. So it's always a moving target. And I would say that the difficulty that we've had is sometimes getting the governor to engage on this more consistently so we can work it out. But, like the Speaker's office was working with the AG's office and the attorneys off session moving into session on like the regarding the courts and those jurisdictions. So it's not as easy to say, and that's why, sometimes one of the difficulties we've had, and Madam Speaker actually talks about this is at some point, is how do we communicate to folks who are allies and supporters and elected officials about legislation going in, but hopefully they can check with the chiefs or the Wabanaki Alliance being a clearinghouse, because sometimes we get overwhelmed with the good intentions of too many pieces of legislation. And it makes us scattershot throughout the process, especially when things start getting pigpiled on top of one another, or tribes not necessarily lining up specifically on legislation. Things have to get tweaked. So I think one of the biggest difficulties we have sometimes is with the best of intentions, people put in legislation, but it also thins out our resources, taking us off of larger pieces of legislation that I think are from listening to the ambassadors, the chiefs, and the tribes that are more important to them. So yeah, sure, that's a great idea. We support it, but really getting behind it is really difficult when we're, in hand-to-hand combat on other pieces of legislation. So I don't know if that answered your question as clearly as I could, but sometimes it's a circuitous route when it comes to legislation.
Thank you. You get the hat trick, all three of them.
Thank you.
And that would have been mine. I mean, it's difficult to say which path, because it's been different, I think, with every single bill. The path forward has been different. And like Toby said, sometimes it's the AG's office. And sometimes we've even had outreach from the governor's office, and then sometimes it's legislators. I think the same way forward for anything.
Great. Any other commissioners that have questions or comments on this particular topic?
Newell, I have a question.
Yes.
Just based on what I'm hearing, observations from the past legislative session, what we potentially might expect moving into the next session. Just want to say good morning once again, Madam Speaker and Chief Sabatis, good to see you. But my question, I got a couple of them as we consider the upcoming legislative session. And there was mention of the effect of the national elections. I think my question relates to local state election. I don't know, Toby, if you could do any potential forecasting of what the legislative environment may be based on, it may be premature. We may not know until maybe after election what the legislative environment is going to be in Augusta. But if you have any foresight on that and anything to emphasize as far as district elections or whatever you might add there. I think another question that I have in making observations from the past legislative session, I heard a little bit more about communications between, the chiefs, the state, the AG's office, governor's office, probably MITSC commissioners as well as Wabanaki Alliance and their coalition. What areas could potentially be strengthened in regards to communication? And how can we really strengthen unifying our goals once again as we move into the next legislative session? I want to emphasize, how much effort has gone in since 2019 when the chiefs of all the tribes made the decision to return to Augusta to begin their work once again to improve tribal-state relations. I want to say that these incremental changes in regards to laws that have been implemented, and I echo what's already been said in regards to, the resources that go into this, and I believe Chief Sabatis could speak to this as well, but I don't want to put her on the spot. There's a lot of hours that go into these efforts and a lot of resources that go into these efforts. So I'm just wondering, how can we strengthen our unification as we approach the next legislative session? And in what capacity can each of us contribute to that?
You have a follow-up?
No, and she's absolutely right, and I'm sure that all the chiefs would agree, it does take an abundance of resources, both in, our time and all of your time and, have legal teams that are working, even when we're not on this, with the Attorney General's office pretty frequently. I think, I don't know if there's a way to make that easier, because no matter what, we definitely want to be present when things are being drafted, and able to negotiate this language is so important. So I think I would love to see a way forward that is consistent, so that you're not waiting for the next person to come forward and want to help with something. Or it would be nice if there was a path forward when we're looking at bills and putting things forward where, we just said that it's not always the same. It could be the AG's office, sometimes it's legislators. It would be nice to have some sort of, that we're not having to recreate how we're working with different folks all the time.
How about Mr. Ranko or Mr. Holches or Mr. St. John?
I don't want to leave you in the lurch and not respond. Thank you, everyone, and especially for the speaker coming today. I think within the context of MITSC and coordinating message, and I think that's a really big thing for us. I think we would really desire that. And in terms of legislation, I'm on the legislative committee. Like we're always just seeking ways of support. I think within our mandate, obviously, but I think that's really important for us to be in communication and support one another in terms of fulfilling the promise of our work together.
Lewin?
And I echo what Darren said. just with a different voice. Thank you, everyone.
Is it possible, I just wanted to interject one other thing to think about. If is if that was okay.
Please.
Okay, because when I think about all of this, I think we learn so much. I know at I-Statement, I learn so much every year. And one of the things I learned probably most significantly during my term as speaker is to continue in the legislature, and I'm running for the Senate. Should I continue in the legislature? The one thing I can't do is to continue to do things the exact same way and expect a different result in my own work. Because most of the time, it requires me to trust that all of the other people, all the other entities involved in the process are going to show up differently so that I get a different result. And that's just not the case, I don't think, in the next 2 years. I think the national political scene that we are all experiencing together right now is going to have a very big effect on the state legislature and the outcomes. Unfortunately, sadly, I mean, I could cry continuously, because I think our country is in for a very, very, very rude awakening, difficult period of time. And I think some of that is going to translate into whether or not we keep the majorities for the next 2 years. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But if we lose even one chamber, that is a very, very different game plan for us. Very different. And we have to admit and plan for that so that we don't continue to do things the same way and expect a different result. We are going to, if we keep these majorities, they're going to be slim. And when we had the heyday of very large majorities, we all know what we were able to get accomplished. So the piece I'd like to add is to not underestimate, regardless of the outcome, to not underestimate the need to educate legislatures that every 2 years we change significantly. And so I really have been humbled and impressed and honored with all the work that the Alliance has been able to carry out. But I think what we have to add to the table, and Toby and Malian and Rena, the chief, you all know this, for the last couple of years, we've been trying to do education of legislators. Hinton did a lot of education for legislators. Very, very, very important that time was spent with Republican legislators. But I just want to add to this, to as we think about this, that we've got to think about the need to make sure that every 2 years we have to figure out a way to educate legislators so that we're not doing the exact same thing the exact same way and expecting a different result. It's going to be difficult in the 132nd. And I also heard Toby kind of intimate that we got to be very strategic on what it is that we bring forth. And I'm using the word "we" here. And I hope it's a we. I'll do whatever we can. I'll do whatever I can. And I don't want anyone to feel any pressure that of my presence here in moving forward. But we've got to do things differently if we expect in this political climate to achieve what we all know is necessary to continue to fight for.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, and I would just say that I think that's what we're trying to, I appreciate that and for highlighting that. I think that's kind of what we're trying to get across, is that what are all of these brilliant minds that are in this arena here, whatever we're in. Some of us are here, some are there, to find a way to do things in a good way, right? To move, you know, we've had small steps, we've taken different routes, but together, I think we can come up with a plan maybe and an idea on how to move things forward. I appreciate you all. And we do have a couple more questions as well.
I wanted to add too, if it's okay.
Go ahead, please.
Corey and I did some sessions with folks that were legislators, that were employees, that were just partners in the state with, actually with philanthropy. And we talked a lot about natural resources. But he really did the legislative piece and I did like anecdotal things and talked about the community. People were really responsive to that. Because they got the real life, you know, these are the impacts, and he talked about, you know, the differences between other tribes and us and battles that we're really having. So I think that I'm still hearing from people about that, and what kind of an impact that had on them. So I don't know if, you know, moving forward, if we're going to do some more sessions, having it be paired, you know, not just the legal piece of it, but having someone talk about like the real life scenarios we're seeing.
Thank you, Chief.
I guess I would agree that the hearing the very personal stories was really impactful, particularly around the Wabanaki Studies Bill. There was a teacher who was working, I think it was in Titus.
Lynn Mitchell and Callis.
Yeah, Lynn Mitchell and Callis, and you know, you could just tell how committed she was to it, and so that really, I think, made a huge impression. And then I believe Rachel and Paul Tebow, you want to talk a little bit about what you did with the Judiciary Committee, the education?
Yeah, so each new legislature, we have been invited by the Judiciary Committee to present, just introduce MITSC and some of the stuff we're working on. So the last time we talked, we had just published C-Run and we were able to talk about that. So I'm sure Jill and I will be doing that again and trying to convey wants us to.
Maybe coordinating efforts if the Alliance is planning to do something, the chiefs are planning to do something.
Working together. Yes, absolutely.
We had also put together legislator orientation packets that we, Speaker Ross actually helped us to distribute those to every single legislator. So we could be working on that again and decide what should go in those packets.
I think it would make sense to partner with like the Alliance and other information in there, so it's not getting multiple tribal things that are coming.
We're gonna talk about it later, working on our cultural competency curriculum. And so really basic questions like how do each of the tribal governments operate? Decision-making at Penobscot may be different than, yeah, so those kinds of things.
If
Hi,
I could just
everyone.
interject,
Sorry.
oh, sorry.
You first, speaker, please.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say how much that is needed, particularly for Judiciary Committee members, because all of the spin that was able to come out of Republican members on Judiciary that were just, they were factually untrue. There's just, it was a manipulation of voice and data, and it was so I'm just, thank you for putting information together. I think that a special, I don't know, I'm thinking, looking at Ambassador Brian, but maybe even something very, very, very particular to the members who serve on Judiciary and possibly VLA, I don't know, but definitely Judiciary, maybe even something just for Judiciary members might make sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm also sort of hoping we have some different Republicans on Judiciary this go around.
I think I like that basic, you know, knowledge. I think one of those aha moments that we had a few years ago was that realized people didn't understand that the tribes here in Maine are unique and that all the other tribes across the nation don't have the same issue, and you're only asking to be where they're at, not for special privileges. So when we had that conversation, then when we realized that people just didn't understand that and they thought that we were just trying to ask for special sessions for our tribes that weren't something that were had across the nation. I mean, except for people in the task force, but yeah, that was a huge.
Mr. Crofton McDonald?
I just wanted to share a fairly simple point. You know, in these meetings that we're constantly having, and I know we've been through this a lot, questioning what should be the role of MITSC, what good can we create in this space, and I just wanted to highlight. I guess the conversation that we're having right now is it's some of the really good we can do is education, and we can focus on teaching and talking about these things and teaching legislators and the general public as well. I think that's the good MITSC can do.
Sorry, may I make a tiny suggestion?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think in terms of so education of legislators, specific kind of material for judiciary members, those two things truly are necessary. I'm wondering if we can also consider doing something special for, and I don't know, we can start to look into this. I don't know if it's possible, but I think having special education or an education for staff would make sense, because the OPLA staffs, all of these committees, and just having staff that's knowledgeable beyond Janet Stokoe might be in our best interest, as well as the staff for the officers, the House Democratic Office, the Senate Democratic Office. I just think educating the staff who are working with policymakers would make things a lot more efficient use of resources, because now you've got staff who hopefully get it, working with policymakers who hopefully get it, working with the public who are coming in. And so I just wanted to add that staff component to the mix, so that we don't forget that there are policy analysts and there are legislative staff for each legislator. Each legislator has a staff person assigned to them. We should perhaps consider an education for that population of folks who are really critical to the process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So we did have a couple more questions, and I'm going to combine them because one of the first parts is, talking about the bills in the last session, and then any ideas of what might we want to put forward in the next session. But keep that in mind. And I guess one of the basic questions we have is, what should MITSC role be with the legislative process? For example, should it wait to be asked for recommendations via testimony by the tribes? Or should MITSC step in when the bill concerns an area MITSC is involvement with? And keeping in mind the other question where the bills that have already gone through, and what are we looking to put through in the next session as well? open it up to anyone that has ideas.
Yes.
Chief,
How the appointed members communicate with the leadership. I know that when people reach out to me and say, hey, this is what we're talking about, like, what do you think? And so we have those conversations both about this and with the alliance, so, I mean, I'm full with MITSC time on things. I think if there's communication with the appointed people, I think so that really that message is coming.
right, so your two tribal reps that sit on the commission, and so what you're saying, as long as that commission is communicative with the Holton Band, then and in agreement, I guess,
Yeah.
because they'll bring stuff back to you as well.
Yeah, and I think that, there've been times when I've asked to not do things because I wasn't comfortable, with MITSC moving forward, but, I don't know how the rest of the group functions and if they're voting personally or if they're talking with their leadership, but that's how we do it, and so I guess it depends on how.
Right, no, I appreciate that, we do have a lot of entities at the table here today, so. It's great to hear that. Go ahead.
Hello. So as I've been listening to this and thinking about what you just asked, Newell, one of the things that I think is of dire importance is communication. When I know there's times when I'm not quite sure where we stand in regards to my representation for the Penobscot Nation, and so it would help if we can find a way to maintain constant contact actually with these other entities, so that way we have the alliance, we have our own internal tribal leaders, and I think the communication between us needs to happen and be maintained, because this allows us as commissioners on this body to gather our thoughts and come together within this commission whenever we have decisions to make, discussions to have. We're a little more accurate. When there's a delay between ourselves and our own tribal entities, it makes it a little hard. So I know sometimes I try to reach out. A lot of times I rely on Darren, but anyway, but we do have other entities, other organizations that are present here. So I would ask that those representing those entities to, with the respective tribal nations, if you're a Penobscot sitting in on one of these organizations, reach out to the Penobscot commissioners here, so that way we are always in line with what's going on. Same thing with the Passamaquoddies, and I know the Maliseets seem to do this quite frequently. Just listening to how our Maliseet commissioners interject in our meetings. So anyway, that would be for me. And I assume with Darren, Darren actually sits with some of these people too. So that would make it a lot easier for me to be able to formulate my thoughts and interject as well.
Lewin? So we do have other entities here, and we do have a person that is also a tribal ambassador and president of an organization that deals with tribal issues as well. Ambassador?
Yeah, thanks, Noel. I think, I've seen a few legislative sessions now and different sort of iterations of how MITSC interacts with the legislative process and the tribes and the different bills. And I think that there's definitely a great opportunity for collaboration here and having better lines of communication for sure. And this past session, I thought it was super helpful to have Jill so present, and I love that MITSC is, neutral but informed. I think that's where the strength lies. I think being able to show up and testify, here's black and white how this looks for the tribes, for the state, and I don't think it's an organization that should ever be political. It should just be what it is. It's this entity that's equal parts in theory and should be informed enough to bring forward good things into bills. I think part of our charge, probably as tribal leaders and people involved in the political side of things, is making sure that we can kind of protect the commissioners and the staff from some of those sort of ugly parts of the process and being pulled into back and forths over things. So I see the strength in MITSC as providing this kind of voice of reason sometimes and saying, this is where we're at, this is what we foresee. And I think that the times MITSC has shined in this legislative process is when testimony is offered that way. And also I will say I appreciated the steps taken by MITSC to oppose those nominees from the governor that would have been problematic. I think that the reaction to that was totally unfair and overblown. And I think that, often it's easy for folks from the state to point a finger and say that's too pro-tribal, that's blah, blah, blah. But if you have folks coming in with these agendas, that's going to hinder progress. So it doesn't mean that everybody needs to be pro-tribal, but it does need to be a slate of folks with an open mind, ready to learn, not advancing other interests or holding on their positions of power in these municipal governments. So I will say I appreciated that process and how that went. So there is a role for MITSC, I think, to be active in this space, and I'm really interested into how to better support that and really collaborate around these pieces of legislation. And I think that the main theme here being education is probably a great place to start that. I think another area where there's been some great contributions has been research and these studies and getting information to lawmakers. And I love the idea of adding in staff and OPLA. Last session, we had the analyst for the VLA committee really not understanding a lot of the things we were talking about when we were looking at these tribal gaming bills. And there were already some contentious aspects to those bills. So having an analyst not grasping things and not her fault. It was her first time, dealing with a lot of this stuff. So I think education is a great starting place for a lot of this work, and definitely heard you loud and clear, Bert. I'll be definitely better at looping in Penobscot commissioners and making sure that we're all, huddled up once in a while and catching up on this stuff.
I'd like to also add something else, education. And I think it's very important, and I appreciate what you said, Molly. I always do. Anyhow, so education. One of the things that I've done, in traveling, throughout the state of Maine. A lot of times when I've traveled through, I'll stop at these. Of course, I get hungry, right? I'll stop in one of these small towns and decide I'll go into their local diner. And what happens is of course, I guess people kind of realize that I'm indigenous, and there's always a conversation that gets struck up, by, somebody in there, and I use that as an educational time, because what happens is, if you ever notice when you sit in these little places and, you start talking, people are listening. People are listening. And some of the things that I found is when, some of the local citizens, they start these conversations with me. A lot of the information that they have is stuff that, way off, and things that they were taught or shared with by other entities, that don't have a clue what tribal people go through, that our tribal nations deal with. A lot of misinformation. And so I find that being a time of a chance at education. So I start talking to them, but I seem to raise my voice a little bit louder, because I know these other people that are sitting there trying to listen in. And so, trying to dispel some of the misinformation that they've grown up with, and that in turn they share with others. So, but I pull out the realities of the relations between the tribal people and other, let them know that, we're not against the non-native population. What we're against is the things that are being done against the tribal nations. So education, regardless of which body that we represent here, in this case, Maine Indian Tribal State Commission, you have other people, from the other organizations. It doesn't have to be in a formal meeting, that education. And, then we have other things. I know, our staff, Rachel, she goes out, has a booth, which is an educational booth for MITSC. And that's a time when a lot of this, just the normal civilian population can come around. And I think I noticed, it was requesting for some of our people to be there, some of our commissioners to be on hand. And I found when I was there, spent a lot of time educating people, answering questions, and just creating good relations. And I think that in itself lends a stronger voice overall. So let's not limit ourselves to just like a classroom setting or something like that, or an organizational setting. But remember, every one of us, are in contact with just normal, everyday people. Utilize that. Leland?
I'll just reach out, and then if you don't have comments, that's fine, as well. Speaker Talbot Ross.
Well, my apologies, I was listening to Bert. Did you ask me a specific question? My apologies.
Oh, well, just comments on the participation of MITSC in the legislative process, looking how we can be better.
But I would absolutely, thank you for the question. I absolutely agree with all of the ways in which we've been thinking about it, and we'll join Ambassador Bryan in thanking Jill for being present for a number of really critical times here, particularly in the second regular term, the short session. So I want to thank, the presence means a lot. And so I want to thank MITSC and Jill for doing that. I think all of the ways in which we've been talking about have been really helpful. I mean, the communication piece is huge. I think I heard Chief Sabatis talk a little bit about that more. It's just, I would say this, that in terms of doing work inside the building, it's extremely important to take the direction from, the tribal chiefs, the ambassadors, MITSC, the alliance. It's just, I don't know if we say it enough, but it is impossible to move the work forward without active communication. With Representative Dana, the ambassadors, the chiefs, because you want to move the work forward in the ways that it is meant to be. You don't want to apply your own philosophy to that, or your own experience to that. It's not. And so the communication, and I know I was gonna call Representative Newell, but I know Rena knows this really firsthand, that communication from inside, outside the building, constant communication is what's needed, because the folks who are working on it every day have to, in little teeny tiny ways, are trying to move the information forward. And if the communication isn't there, you don't know how to do that. And so a good role, I think, is in communication, with MITSC. I would err on more communication than less. From as many resources that we have in our toolbox that represent, that formally represent, that formally represent the tribe's interests. More communication than less, because the hardest thing to do is to try to pull information from people when you're living in a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week cycle. So I think communication would be a really good role, and certainly the education component. The other thing for me, I must say, is I just honestly am not sure. I'm not sure how, what MITSC does. I'm just straight up on, as a legislator, I'm not quite sure what the scope of the work is. I've appreciated the research and getting the research that you all have put together. I still haven't, some of the reports on my coffee table. But I'm not really quite sure about the scope of MITSC's work. So maybe there's a component in here. We keep talking about education as if we all know what we're talking. Maybe there's a specific educational curriculum or a component, a module, a unit, just on what MITSC's scope and task is. So that as Ambassador Brian said, MITSC isn't really a political, it's not, it doesn't operate in those ways, but I'm not sure the ways in which it does operate and how MITSC is a resource in the policy development work that we're doing. I could use clarification, so maybe there's an orientation from MITSC we can set up, with legislators, to orientate us to the resource that MITSC is. Just some thoughts. I hope I didn't go too long.
I can share some of the our traditional legislative process in the past. The way it's worked within MITSC is we have a legislative committee. The legislative committee stays on top of the bills that might potentially impact us and tribal populations. And then we will bring those bills to the greater MITSC body, and then we'd have an internal vote on MITSC stance, whether or not to testify in support, in opposition, to do nothing. And traditionally in the past, MITSC has testified in various capacities. So that's kind of the traditional process that we've done in the past. I've always kind of been curious, Speaker, if you might share your thoughts on how helpful that is when MITSC chimes in on bills. That is the traditional process that we've been practicing in the past, though.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's extremely helpful. The more information, the more communication, the more education, the better. And I'll say again, err on the side of too much because it's empty vessels every 2 years, Ambassador, and even during the 2-year cycle, there's so much that's coming at legislators that the squeaky wheel does get the, attention. And, what would be nice is if as we think about these next steps, is to think about how it gets integrated as part of a normal way of doing business. Not tangential, not because there's a bill and and everything's connected to just one bill, but to think about how do we integrate the communication, the education, and the relationships. So that you're creating this culture, this environment that has respect for the tribes and has an honest interest in having a relationship. How do we integrate it so it's not just based on LDXXX? Would be my suggestion for MITSC to think about.
Thank you. Commissioner Newell.
Noel. Can I just circle back to some comments? I appreciate this discussion very much and all the comments that have been shared, emphasizing education and communication. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if I might just circle back to Chief Sabattis's comment made earlier, as we kind of wonder about MITSC's role, and then you have representation here, of course, from other organizations, and of course you have the Madam Speaker here as well. But I heard words as collaboration, right? And so we've been working towards trying to improve tribal state relations, cooperation, collaboration, consultation, and in the end, we got LD 585, which really supports collaboration. But I think what I'm hearing today, and I really feel I have a dual role now, being appointed as a MITSC commissioner and a newly appointed interim associate director of the Wabanaki Alliance, that I want to emphasize what Chief Sabattis kind of mentioned earlier in working collaboratively between the Wabanaki Alliance, because you do have ambassadors here that sit on both. If we could work together moving forward to just emphasize that communication between the two organizations. But I want to emphasize too, that I've always, as a tribal representative, I took the lead from the chiefs, so I really felt it was important, whatever direction that I moved, it came from the chiefs in regards to how to approach certain legislation during the sessions. I kind of want to get back there if we could, and really emphasize that. And is there a way possible to consider, Chief Sabattis, if I could put you on the spot, on having tribal leadership meeting from the chiefs, with an invitation to MITSC, with an invitation to the Wabanaki Alliance, and even representation, I don't know how that would look, Madam Speaker. Somewhat similar to today, but moving forward, and more frequently, I guess. I heard something about year-long education, I would emphasize year-long communication as well. Any thoughts to that?
And I think ideally that would be great. Things changed, I think, a little bit with COVID and getting people together. I used to feel like I could get everybody together if I just bugged them enough. I mean, I could help kind of spearhead that and get that together. I know that a while back, the speaker and I had tried to figure out how we could get everybody together, and we were gonna host at our campground because we have the lodge and we have all the cabins for people to stay. You know, I don't know what makes sense for a location, and you guys, you know, everybody's all over the place. I do think being in person is important sometimes. And if you did wanna do this, I think it would be nice to start that off that way and then maybe transition into doing something like this, whether it's a quarterly, you know, touch base or what, but I do think there's some value in that I know what my expectations are, but that doesn't mean it's the same as all the other tribal leaders. So, you know, maybe it is a good time to look at having a conversation before we get busy with the next session.
Only one chief.
Lewin. Mr. Ranko.
Sure. Or doctor, you can call me whatever.
Doctor. Oh, sorry, doctor. Sorry, doctor.
Holy.
Yeah, I mean, I had just, you know, talked about the communication. I think of that deeper cut with the between Alliance and MITSC, especially then of course I mean MITSC as state representatives is not a lot these days, but you know, I think we I mean, I think the tribes take MITSC very seriously. I mean, these appointments, you know, we've gone back and forth with appointing to MITSC and seeing it as a space. But I think and I really appreciate what the speaker said in terms of, you know, the move towards the constitutional office of that like year-long and consistent kind of guiding pieces around the policy dynamics. You know, I think there's a role for MITSC, and I feel like that's one of the traditional roles that before the alliance MITSC had was more engaged with policy and legislation from the tribal point of view, and I think the alliance has taken over the lead on that, which I think is, I'm not criticizing it, I think that's more appropriate in many ways, but I think how does MITSC interface with all of that piece of it, I think is something we would want to have that discussion and really, you know, maybe for the retreat, you know, I guess we're having a retreat, right? MITSC retreat, we can do that then.
I think that with the development of the alliance, we've really been more strategic with how we do everything, and I definitely think it makes sense to look at how the two can be complementary in all of the work that we're doing moving forward. And so that communication would be really key with that.
And we still have Sam on us? Joey?
I think for us, it's been tough. Only brought up both the opposition of the governor's people she wanted to appoint, and we struggled with it. It wasn't an easy decision, and unfortunately for Jill, she was so new at this and probably took the most heat from it. Wasn't her doing. I've always struggled with that part with the state. Especially to me, the governor's side of it. I don't think we've been respected by them in any way, honestly. We complained for over a year or so now, the lack of state appointments, and it's been a frustrating process for us to deal with. And I felt as a group, you know, when you get together, not everybody's going to agree, but at least have open minds, and when you're bringing people in that absolutely have a closed mind, it didn't make any sense to us. I'm sorry that Jill had the heat from that from the governor's office, but I think it's a stand that we had to make, and Chief talked about, as members, are we speaking to our chiefs, and I definitely do. I run everything by them. I don't make a decision unless they agree upon it, but I think as a collective, we should probably get together a little more and speak about stuff. But it does get frustrating for us on this side, and I know I've only been at it for a couple of years, and sometimes it's been frustrating with the stand some people want to take. It hasn't been an easy road for us, that's for sure. I guess that's all I got right now.
Robert?
Hoping you weren't gonna call on me. Let's swipe at several of these screens. First of all, there was another meeting at which we discussed communication upstream between tribal reps or the leadership. This was back when Downing was chair, and there was some sense among the tribal delegation that, yeah, we really could do a better job of staying leadership. At that time, there were still several other state nominees at the table. We kind of looked at each other because very different line structure. I'm writing a paper on this. I finish it, but nobody wants to read it. All the difference in the role between being a representative and agent or being independent. I think everybody on the state side thought we were supposed to be independent. Don't talk to the governor. Don't ask him anything. Make all your decisions independently. I have dealt with Jerry Reed on only a few things. Didn't get much input or output on the appointments. Did cooperate together fine on the Bill Stanger MITSC appointments. And I've been in touch with him. Fisheries study and through to nobody in the governor's office asks our understanding or impressions of anything that goes through MITSC. In my own mind, I figured MITSC was created to be some kind of big picture, non-political entity. That probably requires consensus, communication, and thinking. But what we find in the legislature, I guess, was the speaker who referred to pulling information out. I think in terms of demand push and supply pull. Demand push is a big picture agency figuring everything out and passing it down to the legislature and saying, here's what you want to do. Demand pull is when a bill is filed on Friday and comes up for a public hearing on Monday. We're expected to have some input into it. We don't have meetings that could and possibly distill big picture thinking down to individual bills. And what we've been getting by on is sort of a wing and a prayer that if the topic relates to something that we've discussed or acted on in the past, we can probably infer what our position as an institution should be. But we're not presently not useful as spokesman for the governor. Better or for worse, we're independent, but we can't change the dynamic. Sort of wrap that up. It's easier for us to testify on those bigger picture items that we put into our pot and stir and think on for a while. Whereas those short-term demand pull requests are more difficult to respond to because we don't get the whole process. We have to guess on what our institutional history has been. It doesn't give even the tribal representatives much of a chance. communicate with from leadership and get these bills on short notice like that. And I mean, no offense to anybody connected with the legislature, won't deserve medals for that. You're way too fast for me.
Thank you, Mr. Tripway. Lewin, I think we have Toby. Yvonne? Okay, all right, so, does anyone else have a comment before I speak?
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Bob, for that. I just really wanted to flag everything that Bob said. I mean, let's look around at the room right now. We have, I believe, a single state commissioner with us right now. It's been the reality for a long time, is we're just really struggling with these state appointees not being appointed. And the tribal representation around the room have direct communication with our leadership, but from my understanding of Bob, it's not the same with the state appointees. So how do we navigate that? That's just the reality that MITSC has been facing since its creation. And I don't know. I think it's something we need to talk about, though.
Lindsay. Yeah, so, and I think this whole process, what we're doing here this morning is trying to find, a path forward for MITSC, basically, but for all of us as well, working together. And Darren mentioned, our retreat, right? That a couple of years ago, we tried having a retreat where we invited all the chiefs to come in for a session. And that didn't really work out the way we wanted that to, but, well, and I'm not opposed to trying that again at some point. If we have a specific meeting that we could hold, that doesn't necessarily have to be a retreat, where we invite tribal leadership, the tribal representatives, state representatives, to a session where we can sit and talk about things of concern or those involved. And I think the tribal reps, I know them all actually, but we want to hear from those tribal reps consistently, and we do. I'm not saying that to anyone. We hear from them and we know what's going on. State reps, again, I think Bob summed it up a little bit in terms of like independent in a way, right? That you're there, but what is the focus? What is the focus of the state representation? And then, we have the tribal ambassadors as well. One ambassador sits on MITSC as well. And we have the Wabanaki Alliance and, that also has input into many processes. So I think, maybe there's a way we can communicate, as everybody's been saying, and collaborate in terms of having a session where we all get together and participate in discussion around MITSC participation, number one, and then number two, how do we change our landscape? And I appreciate you all for being here as well, and I think Robert has another.
I don't want to monopolize the floor, but to the extent that the subject is not politics, but communication, I want to mention that Jill and Rachel and Zeke and I have been at least talking about doing what we call.
All right, hey, we'll see you later.
Good seeing you. Take care.
Chief.
You.
I'm supposed to be on vacation, but she was texting. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, everyone, we just have.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, you're fine.
Nice seeing you. Sit by you now. Now you're in trouble.
Welcome, Chief Peter Paul.
Yes, thank you.
Nephew. We've had some of the legislative, people here with us this morning, and we also had the, ambassador with us as well from Penobscot, along with the tribal state commissioners as well, and Robert being a, state-appointed commissioner, Robert Checkaway.
Yeah.
And we've been just talking about like the last legislative process, what was good, what was bad, how can we change it, what can we do differently? And then we also talked a little bit about MITSC's role moving forward maybe. And we had a lot of great comments in terms of like how we can work together, right, to make to change the landscape for
Yeah.
for
Well,
us.
one thing for me as a tribal leader is like, it's constant education. It's constantly educated, right? So like, what is MITSC's role in, that constant education of the state legislators on things that they have already passed and things that are in the pipeline, right? That may have been passed at some other point. What are some of these things? And what's the path forward? How do we continue this education instead of like, because every time it's like an uphill battle. It's like we gotta keep re-educating and getting people on our side. It's like, it's a lot. It really is a lot, building each one of those relationships. Every time a certain person from a town leaves, it's like, so are they representing, the town or their best interest? And like, so how do we keep that piece where they've already supported us, and why do we have to keep going back to them? So that's one thing that I have a hard time with.
Awesome, because we've been talking about that, as a lot of people have mentioned the education, and they've been pushing that forward, along with the communication and the collaboration and working together, basically.
Even basic things, like there's no PSAs that can be put out, like, that are what we've been doing, what we've accomplished, what some of these goals are. How are native tribes treated in other states? What does that look like? And has any of the MITSC people, have they gone to these other states and talked openly with, what are the benefits of the tribes? I guess that's what we gotta look at, is like, what are the benefits? How can we contribute to Maine's economy, Maine's growth, every part of it?
Make a big video they can watch every 2 years.
Big. Right.
Let's make a big video they can just watch every 2 years.
We like
Yeah.
videos.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
So we've been talking about all of that and trying to, like I said, come up with a plan where we can, how do we bring ourselves to a newer level maybe even if that's the case.
Yeah, one of them is like, just really getting people to buy in what you're trying to do. That's the basics. It's like, what are we trying to accomplish? Lives better. And try to keep our culture. It's like, it costs money to keep it costs money to do anything. So you imagine if you want to keep your culture, how much is that going to cost? I can't even put a dollar amount. Like, how do we get the basket makers back? How do we get the beaters back? How do we get all these people that used to do all these things, into this world that we live in today? And how do they contribute? Like, how do the simple tribal people contribute to me? We gotta get back to that.
Yeah, rise them up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, give them skills, And what I wanna do is, one thing I never really shared with Jen, and she was always asking, was that, I really want to bring back, our culture through paying people to come and learn how to make a basket. We're always getting paid to do these jobs, but like, why can't we pay them to learn how to make a basket? Because there's value in that. Because otherwise, maybe they can't afford to come in and make that basket. So it's like, and then compensating for their time, but that's also like, that's part of the tribe's responsibility, because we haven't been doing it. We haven't been doing these things. We haven't been using our language. So
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I know a couple of years ago, I was sitting on a board for the A&A grants, and they were talking, this one tribe, I think was from Minnesota, I can't remember where, but they had an A&A grant to forward language speaking. So they hired, they paid their tribal citizens, whoever wanted to attend,
Yeah,
for 40 hours a week to learn the language. That was their job.
there's another example out there. I just came from South Dakota, and they were paying parents to go to parenting classes.
Right.
They're paying them and then giving them babysitters. Like, that's how you really fix things. You can, you know,
Like you said, I mean, it's a great idea to learn how to make a basket, to learn to speak your language or
Right.
whatever, but if you can't afford to do that, how does it get done?
we see it different ways, you know, us people sitting in here, but when you ask tribal members, they will let you know why they're not. I ask.
Well, and I mean, we have left here a little bit, but we have a university that's not even an hour away where people can get their early education degree and their degree in Wolastoqey language. But who, I mean, I think paying someone to go to school to do that, to bring that back would be amazing. But I think most people are not gonna choose that path because they need to choose a path where they're going to be able to come back and get a job. If we can't hire 50 people, you know what I mean, who are gonna come back and be teachers. So it's challenging. So I do think that sounds like.
Right, and to follow up on that, right, so then if you want immersion schools, right, then you do have to have the teachers to fill all of those grades as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
I know,
It's hard.
Escazoni did that.
Yeah.
All right, so Robert, do you want to finish? Or are you finished?
I went so far. She just before you walked in, the discussion was on communication between groups and representatives and leadership. I was explaining that state appointees have a independent model, by which I mean we don't get instructions. But I wanted to mention under the general subject of Rachel, Jill, Zeke, and I started the idea a couple of years ago, what we called a listening tour, at which we would send out a small strike force of me and Zeke and Rachel and Jill, who visit tribal leaders at each of the communities, and we made it as far as Chief Newell in Sabayak for the next legislature convene. And that's part of what's going on here, is I realized you can't talk to anybody in tribal leadership when legislature is in session. So I'd like to see us get out on the road a little more, all on just to see what comes out of it. Almost every time this kind of subject comes up, momentum builds and people say, well, we ought to go to, don't just visit tribal leaders, we've got to visit the whole community, and don't just send a small group, we've got to send the whole, it's a commission. Then you're going to have, 9 or 12 or 13 people pressing it. Private meeting, and it's just not going to flow as freely. And for some reason, we cannot get 13 people. Same room, and tribal leaders are busy. I would like to call on you. Just again, you too, Chief.
One thing, what you said in the beginning was like, you don't get direction from the government. I mean, I think that's a huge problem. I mean, that's a major problem. If you guys aren't getting direction from the governor, like, how do we get some of this done? I mean, if she's not in support, or, if there's no communication, you talk about communication, we gotta communicate to everybody. We can't just be leaving one person out. One of the most important people out of the conversation. That's not fair to anybody. And then when she comes in and says no. Right? So to me, that's not fair. Like, how do we make it so that you guys are supported by the government? What has to happen? Because isn't this a government entity, right?
Yes.
So how do we get the buy-in from the government? Like, you got the buy-in from, we're here. but where's the governor? I see Rachel, but it's like, how do we get, how do these other people engaged, and that's. Yeah, we need to communicate that.
I have a long paper coming up, send you a copy on the difference between independent roles versus representative roles, and it has been conundrum for you.
Well, and I mean, right on your own website, it says MITSC is tasked with supporting effective tribal state. How does that work? If you're popped in here separate from the.
Because we are untainted by the governor. We do not speak for her. We do not take her orders.
Yeah, but she still has to be part of the conversation, because you see what has happened in the past. No. Yes.
I don't necessarily think you have to take orders from her, but if you don't have communication from her about her views on things, how do you help support? And it's broad.
Yeah, I think what they're saying, Robert, is that like Zeke's role and Joey's role and the other tribal state commissioners have a different role than you do.
I'm going to understand that. And I didn't get to write the job description.
Right.
If I had my way, circle these tables around here, we'd negotiate the whole omnibus right now. But nobody has asked me to do that.
And I think it's different because this is focused I mean, I know it impacts the state, but it's focused on the tribes. It really is about our rights. And so for any of our appointees to just push a decision or something that impacts us without knowing if we're even supportive of it, I mean, they have to have those conversations. So I understand the difference there.
Not as simple as it looks.
Yeah, and keeping in mind that we are an entity that is charged with, you know, what you just read, but also that comes from the main implementing act, right, where it is focused on tribal relations.
And if you're
At the
operating in a bubble, how do you help with tribal state relations?
Right.
If there's no.
Very good points. Zeke?
Hey, Bert had his hand up first. I'll let him go first.
Your picture's up on the screen, sorry.
Blue one goes. So, in the past, haven't been on this commission for a while, just a few months, right? Anyway, but I have witnessed the way, sometimes the state commissioners have been placed, well, in particular, or not placed, because, when we had a different governor not too long ago, refused to fill the seats, for the state, basically, and I believe it was to hamper the effectiveness of we have today, who filled those seats, but and also how those seats were filled, and basically, the industry people that were placed, with a couple of exceptions, but almost in a way to internally hamper our effectiveness. But the thing is, with that, when we did have a full slate of commissioners, we were still able to get some work done. We were actually able to meet quorum, and do things that were within our charge. Now, with the onset of these other organizations, and I'm glad Ambassador Bryant had brought up the idea of they can take on the political end of things, and we should be able to focus on our main charge was to constantly assess the relations between the tribes and state. And how do we do that? I know we've taken a lead in some cases when it came to the political battles, submitting different testimonies and such. And I think we still need to do that. However, in order for us to function, doing our job, assessing all the things that are affecting our people as a whole, not having to worry about entering into all those battles like we wound up having to do because there was no one else to do it. Now here we are. But now we are still in a battle trying to do our job because we don't have quorum. And that's the problem. Yes, we kind of sidestepped a situation where I believe it would have created more confusion within this body in order for hampering us from doing our work. Because I think those certain individuals would have done that. But now we do need to get our full slate of commissioners, and I think I mentioned it before is that well, yeah, and I'm glad Noel, your letter to the governor basically stated we will work with the commissioners she appoints, and we will. Our point, when we disagreed with certain people that she was trying to appoint, those were valid as well. But I think when we were having that discussion, I kind of brought up the fact that yes, we have done that in the past. We've worked with people that would otherwise try to undermine our efforts to do our job, but we've been able to move forward. And I think that's the case now. So, I think the communication, and I'm glad to hear others, mentioning that the importance of that communication between this body and the other entities, around, so that we have an understanding as commissioners representing our particular tribes, our nations, in order for us to know how we need to do things without stepping on the toes of those that are taking care of the legal stuff, the political stuff. Anyway, I don't want to go on. Lou
and Bert. So we are running behind a little bit on our agenda, but I can tell you that this discussion was just priceless. Having this discussion with all of you this morning, forget the agenda, but we do have to have lunch. And you're all invited to join us for lunch as well, so.
But we've been asked to give them like 15 minutes to reduce how long we have to wait in line, because the students, I guess, go at 12, so.
Oh,
we
okay.
go up at like 12:15, 12:20.
12:15?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have 10 more minutes.
that food would get molded by the time it gets here.
We'll wait for you, Bert.
And Zeke got his hand up.
And Zeke, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to address some of Chief Peter Paul and some of your questions. So in the past, the way it has appeared to me, and I want to say thank you to Bob as well. Thank you for giving us some of the experience of what it's like to be a state commissioner. But one example that happened that I was thinking about was I forget the LD number. I think it was LD 2004. Maybe it was the Federal Beneficial Laws Act, where we had our own kind of internal debate, perhaps within MITSC on, and really the way it kind of played out was the tribal commissioners all in support of the bill, of course, and the state commissioners. Bob, you were one of the few exceptions who feel like would usually break the mold, and sometimes Kevin Hancock as well. But for the most part, it seemed like the state commissioners, when it came to their vote, they just drew it in terms of what the governor has said. Or, in that case, it was what Angus King said. And that was what was assumed to be the state stance, so therefore was assumed to be what the state commissioner should choose, with rare exceptions such as yourself, I think, and sometimes Kevin Hancock would jump that aisle as well. But I just wanted to share that because, I mean, for the most part, that's the way it seems like it plays out. And if we had new state commissioners, it would probably play out like that as well. That's just the way it's been in the past. So we have rare state commissioners who break that mold, but that tends to be what happens.
Yeah, thank you, Zeke. We're not letting Bob resign at all. So.
When I showed up for my last confirmation hearing, one of the Judiciary Committee members turned to the clerk and asked if the job was subject to term limits.
No. I appreciate you all again. So does anyone out there on the screen have any other comments or questions for any of us or amongst yourselves as well? Chief Bass?
Yeah.
I can see, she looked right at me. Go ahead, Chief.
No, he was just, asking about possibility of MITSC, looking at the federal beneficial acts that we don't have access to. Know that we had done some work, previously, but is there research and you'll do stuff, maybe there's a follow-up opportunity for some follow-up because there seems like there's some ambiguities even with the list that we had, and so the state says we don't oppose all of these, but how do we, do we ask about every single one or just move forward and exercise something and then wait for them to say they don't agree, or, but I think there might be some space for.
So are you asking that we do some research for the beneficiary?
How do we start it? Who would do it? We don't have a place right now, and we can't do it as tribes. And state, we have asked them to do it and they're not willing, but is this an entity that could take on that and say, look, these are things that we don't believe that would, interfere with state law or supersede state law, and they're more of a benefit, is that something, that MITSC could do, is show the benefits and show where it's not a conflict of
with state
law.
State law, yeah. I think it is actually something we could take a look at for sure.
This is something we run into, at any time.
Yeah, and definitely tribal reps could actually recommend that as well.
Right.
I think we get back to the educational piece. 20 years ago, I did basically a continuing education training for teachers. And it was basically to switch the whole paradigm, to say, this is federal law. These are the authority and the sovereignty that tribes have.
Right.
And that these things were the tribes and names sacrificed. So I think that's the thing, is that the state acts like they're giving something to the tribes as opposed to the tribes have it until they have expressly given it up. So I think that shift needs to happen. And then I do believe I've seen, we can do the research, but I think there's probably been research done, and maybe Blaine knows more about this. I think I saw a memo that someone did, and they pointed out them all out. Maybe it was Suffolk
There is a
University.
list. We had a Suffolk
Suffolk did
University
something.
do list, but I think even moving forward from there, maybe you guys can add to this, but there seems to be some ambiguities in the state doesn't necessarily agree that those are all acts that we don't have access to. Am I right in saying that?
They'll let
Yeah,
us know.
Chief, they always sort of say, well, of course you have access to those, and these are the only times we've stepped in, and they really downplay it. So it might be good to even take a look at those times they've stepped in, what that process has been, because essentially, you all know this, but the tribes can sort of act like we have access to these laws, but there's no process for when and how the state decides that we don't. So, that might be some good research too, like when our tribe tried to use VAWA and they stepped in 2015, or, the different iterations of like Stafford Act interference and all that sort of thing. I think that that'd be really good research for us to have. And even to show good faith, maybe we have research that shows, yes, this federal law is very different from the state, and how would we work through that? Just so it doesn't look like we're only showing the tribal side of things, I guess. Because I think at the end of the day, tribal sovereignty means we want these same rights and the same access as every other tribe. So it almost doesn't matter if the state law is wildly different or would be impacted, because we want to change that, that shift that Joe was talking about. We want to reclaim, and that is us reclaiming, not the state giving. So that's a really good thing to point out. So I think that digging into this research, going into that list, and kind of putting it to them, like, here, you claim we have access to all these, but here's the cases we clearly haven't, and we don't know when you all might step in if we try to take advantage of these laws in the future.
Yeah, it's a good point, Millian. I mean, that's what happened in the past. I mean, even Senator Collins stepped in at one point.
Stafford
Stafford Act, yeah.
We've had issues with, I think, IKEA and all of that, so I think that basically what is, yes, we know we have a list, but I think taking a deeper dive into those would be great and very helpful for us, because it does come up,
Preemptive
state law, yeah. So yeah, I think it would be helpful because that does come up frequently, right?
Sounds fun.
For John.
Well, it's like, what has it cost the state to do this? And what has it cost the state in financial, either them paying to enforce things, or them not getting, the full benefit of what the tribes can bring? We don't even know the commerce that we can create, because we've never been allowed to.
Right.
So we don't even really know what we're missing. Because we can't, it's unfathomable. It's so far out there. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like I said, this has been invaluable. I love it. We were supposed to get done at 11:15. But here we are, and I'm grateful for it. But we will go get lunch. We'll be back at 1. Again.
I think we get lunch and then can bring it back
Oh, yeah,
here,
we
so
can bring it back.
decide how
Sure,
long.
sure.
When we wanna go
Yep.
back to meeting. Oh, yes. Yes, we are all invited to
Yeah.
have lunch on us, as our guests.
When you go through the line, if you can say you're MITSC, then I'll pay for everybody. MITSC will pay for everybody. I will be the facilitator.
Thank you, Joe.
No, give me that much.
All right. We'll be back. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Not exactly a state dinner, but you're invited.
So what have you been doing? How you been? Good, Geez, nice seeing you. Been a while, huh?
I know, right?
Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm to ask you.
Maybe I'll go ahead and just go.
Like tag along?
So roller rink, I mean, it.
I had one last year, remember?
Everybody laughs at me when I say that. Kind of last long. It doesn't lose money, it's not really making money, we're looking at repurchasing. Some space to Wabanaki
I
Public.
bought a new truck.
A new,
It's one of those things,
new
our
sewer?
council was really, I wanted to get rid of it a while ago. Our council was really sentimental and just nostalgic about the roller rink, and they wanted to keep it open and give it another try. So I'm gonna
step back in and say, okay, we gave it a try.
I read that, I said, either.
Not as bad. It does a little bit if I go too
Very
fast.
strategic decision to diversify away from natural resources.
Yeah, no, they've had it for
1,000 pounds.
way before me, and
It takes me a little, I gotta plan ahead.
we reopened it and
So I like to go
anyways.
big.
So the motel is.
No,
kicking back.
no, even pulling
We
out,
were
it's
full
like
of
you gotta
empties all
make
the
sure.
time. So we closed it.
Jesus, yeah.
Remodel.
You wait till you
And
see
right
it.
now, we're.
I don't know if I can fit down there.
To put a resource center
Class
and.
license change?
Um,
No, it's under, like my truck, they say to haul,
full,
20,000 pounds,
both.
25,000, but no.
Mysterious CMC
So
John.
as long as I'm under 25,000.
Photo of students taking the main guide. Last.
My truck's probably.
Are they thinking of building that around?
I'm getting up there.
Well,
Is it
so
diesel?
we get a campground.
Yeah,
Diesel
Yeah.
truck?
yeah.
And it-
It's a big
um,
diesel.
It's year round. We have like 30
Mile
full
per
of
gallon.
RV sites, lodge, the shower.
That's a gallon.
Yeah.
Everybody, like, the
You all wanna
restaurant.
follow
and
me?
every,
Y'all set to go
and-
for lunch?
Where you
And like,
I see you.
it's 9 houses now, but
Get
we're
over
gonna be
here.
adding on the swimming pool,
Been good?
area, and the lake is just
Trouble?
down the hill. Yeah, most so.
Yeah, it's like, how's the band like?
What I had wanted to do
Good.
prior to COVID was do this class so that we could connect people with campground, because he does have people that want that and they want.
We're gonna talk about it.
Experiences. We worked with our education.
Oh, yeah, you know, yeah.
You're not gonna force me to.
No, no. No, that should not be fine either. Yeah.
Just in the mid-coast.
Yeah.
The weekend.
Yeah.
How to have some cultural experiences built into
Nice.
things.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Yep. I hope so.
If you all wanna follow me.
Yep, coming.
To the cafeteria.
Within anthropology.
You know, leaders eat last. Did you know that?
Tribal leaders.
Well, tribal chiefs are supposed to eat. Why?
Yeah, just. Run down kind of vibe, even though it's like the grand new opening.
Oh, really?
Supposedly.
No, which
Place was it? Now I'm like conscious that I'm on the live stream again.
right.
It was-
It's still going.
I think it is, because I don't want to
Turn it off.
stop it and start it, because then I feel like people might not get it. I don't know, it seems like it could be problems for them getting back on it.
Right.
In the past, I've noticed, like, as someone watching the live stream, sometimes you guys have just muted.
Okay, for lunch?
And usually I still see that there's no
Yeah,
sound, so I
that's
don't know.
what I've done in the past.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, right now, I don't know.
but yeah, don't mess anything.
I don't know if it's my computer that I need to
Oh,
mute
right.
or their computer. My computer is muted. So it's probably their computer, but I'm just here.
Yeah, that's.
I think probably just muted.
Yes. Review of the minutes for May 10. Did anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, corrections for the May 10 minutes? We won't be able to approve them today, but we certainly can make any adjustments to them. Bert. Bert and Zeke. Robert?
I hesitate to move to approve them because I
No,
had such trouble
We
hearing.
can't approve them anyway.
Any corrections?
Oh, no.
Corrections, comments?
I have none.
Thanks, Bert. And you do any changes, corrections, comments? For the May 10 minutes? Can you hear us, Zeke?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, it's a bit loud on my end here. Yep.
Okay. Any questions, concerns, comments on the May 10 minutes?
No, nothing for me.
Okay. Basic 2024 financial report and review. Proposed 25 budget.
So, I sent it out by a separate email, the, profit and loss statements. You can see how we did. This is actually the entire year. Most of everything is in with the exception of one invoice, and I just got one, request for reimbursement from a commissioner. The issue that was outstanding was that the, employer taxes seemed exceptionally high. And it turns out that what had happened was they were charging not only what the employer had to pay, but also the withholdings from the employees. So that wasn't something MITSC had to pay. So we got that straightened out, and so that put things in good shape. The one thing I will need to do is to go back and adjust the 2023 final budget to make that same correction. And then I can get the annual report out. So I didn't want to put out the annual report with those figures showing that MITSC had a deficit when it really didn't. And then just so you know, the when you have negative numbers in the over budget column, that means that that's actually unspent money. We're close to probably about $45,000 left over this fiscal year. Any other questions, but we look good, like we're not overspent in anything. And I want to really express my appreciation to Pat, bookkeeper. Took us quite a bit to figure things out and to go back and
Anyone on the screen have any questions, concerns?
there's time, Bill and I have invited Kate a little bit more about her project, so towards the end of the meeting, depending on.
Yeah.
Everybody can see this. So I had hoped to have a little more of a detailed budget for you, but there were so many things up in the air that need to be calculated. So I just kind of would like to let you know what my process is right now. And of course, the commission will have final approval. So in looking from this year to next year, the state operates on a biennial budget. So we are in the second year of the last budget, and we will be planning for the next biennial budget. There's also, I guess, a supplemental and an emergency budget, so I'll be looking and seeing whether that is something that we need to consider seeking. And so the appropriation did go up quite a bit from, I guess, 2 years ago. It's a significant increase. Went from like $111,000 to $285,500. So whoever did that, congratulations. That was a really wonderful thing because we really did need that money. And most of that did go to staff. So getting more of the work done. The tribal contributions are still at $2,500 each tribe. And I believe Passamaquoddy splits that between the two communities. And there had been some discussion, Paul had talked to me about saying that there was some consideration of perhaps the tribes increasing their contributions. It did come up during a judiciary committee work session. So I wasn't allowed to speak because I think it was only the speaker could speak at that particular session. And they were crabbing about, well, the tribes are involved in this, how come they're not contributing anything? I kind of want to leap up and say, well, they are. So it does mean something that the tribes do contribute to MITSC's budget. But it also helps us to do things like ordinarily you can't pay for food. And as tribal people, we know that that's one of our traditions. Invite people to things and not feed them.
Right.
So that is helpful, is to have that kind of like unrestricted money.
Yeah, there was talk over the last couple of years about increasing that at least to like $5,000 level. And this would make a difference, right?
So it's talking about getting some benefits for the employees.
Mhm.
How would that process work?
Why? We just would have to come up with maybe an ask of some sort from the commission and then have the tribal representatives bring that to you. That makes sense, Zeke?
Yep, sounds fine to me. No, Walalan.
That again? Hello?
Hey,
Could you repeat that, Noel?
I said if we want to get the tribal contribution to MITSC increased, we would have to come up with an ask, a form of a letter to the tribes themselves and then have the commissioners bring that to the chiefs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that probably would be the way to go.
Yeah, and present, present.
Now,
Not a
yeah,
demand.
but I have a question. I have a question, Joe. On this budget elements, you show tribal contributions, but you also said that the tribal contributions are 2,500, right, from each? But this tribal contributions say 10,000.
Right.
Or is that, okay, possible increase? Is that what we're looking at, is with a possible increase, it would beat that?
Well, we're just talking about it, yes.
That's all 4 tribes together, that 10,000 current rate.
So increasing it from the 25 and making it 5,000, 2,500 to 5,000.
It's only 3 tribes.
But it would be 3 tribes
So it's
because,
three tribes. All right.
Passamaquoddy and Township split theirs.
Yeah, I think Savaic and Township each send in their own.
Okay. That must be it.
Yeah, because we did receive, I know we had one from the prior fiscal year, which was 500. So yeah, it's 10,000, so it must be.
Each reservation.
Body.
Thanks, Bert.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The letter, who would the letter come from?
I can send it, yeah. Somebody can write it.
Yeah. Is it accurate to say that the commission recommends?
Yes.
A possible increase, so if they're willing to do that, would be appreciated.
Right.
And we have a little bit of, what Pat likes to do is she basically puts all her budget in a savings account and then we kind of draw it down as it's needed. So because it's sitting in the savings account for a big chunk of time, we do about get $400 worth of interest, which is pretty good. And then the thing that's going to be really helpful is that we did get 2 grants this year. So from the Sewell Foundation, and we'll talk a little bit more about what those grants projects are. But first one was 30,000, and the Broad Reach Fund is 43,000. The one thing that just to be aware of is that Broad Reach didn't want any publicity about the fact that they made this grant to us because it's on by invitation only. So I think it was Rachel sometime. Did you speak to Andrea? Somehow Andrea became aware of what MITSC was doing, and then I had a conversation with her, and then we were invited to apply. So that's a significant one. That's for the cultural competency training. Then we did just apply for a 3-year grant for Native Voices Rising, which I believe is Native Americans in Philanthropy. It's a project of theirs, and that's for $24,885. And the title of it is Wabanaki Food Sovereignty Through Sustenance Fishing Restoration. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the new grant money for, and this would be over the course of the 3 years, would be $97,880. In regard to, quickly wrap this up because we're waiting on Rafi.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he's on.
So next year, the salaries will be slightly higher because I'm full-time. Paul, I believe, was just part-time. And then we're going to request a 3% cost of living raise. I haven't put my full year until October, but I believe Rachel may be just a cost of living raise. And then the qualified self-employment health reimbursement account, that QSARA, that's essentially just a reimbursement of either your insurance premiums or the medical costs, and those are capped by the federal government. So I guess that's kind of on the next page. But anyway, this will be less because there's an individual rate and a family rate, and Paul had the family rate, which was twice what the individual rate was. So that is going to be decreased. And then with regard to operating expenses, I think they're going to be about the same, just renew our lease with Cobb's Cook at the same rate. I argued that maybe we didn't have to increase the rent because they are our fiscal sponsor when we apply for grants, because they're an actual 501c3, but they do get a percentage of 5% at the top of the grant to administer those. So they're getting their money through a different way. And if we do have a full commission, then there's a little bit more expense because we have 4 new commissioners, mileage and per diems. And then the fishing rules are actually going to cost a little bit. We do believe we have to publish in the newspapers. And if we have a hearing, there may possibly be recording costs or transcript costs. And try to keep those down as much as possible because these are hopefully minor rule changes, but we do have to at least do the publication. And then because of the grants, the contractor line item will be reduced at least by 60%. The final contracts will be Pat as the bookkeeper, and then Rafi does some general IT work as opposed, and not just on the projects. I would like to explore obtaining an indirect cost allocation because right now MITSC pays directly for rent, which includes the utilities and internet. We have a separate payroll service and we have our own IT support. And if we were within the rest of the state government, all of those things would be covered, like you go through the state's payroll system and so on. And many of the departments do get an IDC rate. I believe that's put on top of their regular budget, but I'm going to explore that. And then the expenses is, well, one of the things we would really like to do, and we already talked to the commission to get their go ahead on this, is currently we have this QSERA, which is a cap of $6,150 per employee. That's about $512 per month. But just so you know, my monthly insurance premium is $937 a month. So that leaves a gap of $424.50 a month. So I end up paying $5,094 out of pocket each year. So that's basically a reduction in salary. I have Indian Health Services, but those of you who subject yourself to that, you know you can wait 3 years to get some services. So it's not a great idea to go without health insurance. So that's all the MITSC employees receive. Whereas if we were under as treated like state employees and get those benefits, I'm learning that they're all under the union. And so the union has negotiated these different benefits. There's medical monthly insurances paid for, and that's $1,097.74. But MITSC pays the bulk of that, so that would be $1,002.86. There's a dental premium that's only $14.94 biweekly, and then the retirement system, I'm not quite sure how that works. I have to check it. It's about that based on the salary.
Excuse me, so isn't that something we're supposed to be looking into? You know, whether our staff would be able to benefit from the state employee benefit type thing?
Yes, so I have been in contact with the union. And so Angela McWinney has been working with me. And so she spoke with the attorney for the local union branch, and he did some research and he did look at the statute and the policies for the state. And she says, this may not surprise you, but there seems to be a little bit of a conflict or lack of clarity about how that would apply to your staff. But we've talked through a couple of options and wondering if you could clarify a few bits of information that would make one path more ideal over the other. And so I'm gonna have a call with her, I believe on tomorrow actually, to talk through what those different avenues are. One is actually having to clarify it through legislation. Currently another avenue is through the Maine labor. I also had Judd looking into the history of that provision that says we're not subject to state employee policies, personnel policies. To me, when I first read it, I thought it sounded punitive, like we shouldn't have to go through the rigmarole of applying or go through, you know, progressive discipline or that. But now it seems like it could also be interpreted as saying you don't get benefits.
You don't get the benefits.
So we need to have that clarified. So you know what they find out. I did join the union. I don't know how they're gonna get my dues though, because they usually take it right from your payroll that goes through the state. So just so that they would help us. I did join. So that's kind of where we're at. And next meeting, I will have the finalized budget for you, hopefully with a lot of these benefits questions answered. How's Rachel?
No, I think Rafi's on, so,
Hey, let's hear it. Good to see you.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. Thanks for having me to the meeting. I'm excited to talk about the logo getting refreshed. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Is everyone cool there? It's very hot here.
cool in this
Cool
room.
inside.
Good, excellent. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time today, but I just wanted to go over this project of the logo, the MITSC logo getting updated. So I have a brief agenda, just 4 parts. One is the first part is the overview of the process. Second part is what we like and dislike about the current logo. Third part is what are we looking for in the future logo? And then last part is just questions and next steps, kind of an open conversation. Does that sound good to everyone?
That's great.
Yes.
Great. So The design process that I'm proposing we follow is kind of a three-part deal, with the first part being about discovery, which will happen at the MITSC retreat in September. It's one of the items on that schedule, and we would take, I believe it's 2 hours to dig into some of the brand attributes of MITSC and get a little bit more background through a session that I could facilitate. After we have a sense of what we're looking for and what success looks like for the project, which we define in the discovery phase, we could move into the design phase, where we would work with, I'm assuming, some designers. We could certainly do in-house work. I can do design work, but I think I look to the commission for input and guidance on this. I think it would be great if we cast a wider net and maybe tried to bring in some Wabanaki designers, or find a list, develop a list of Wabanaki designers we could potentially work with, and then explore working with someone from that list. And typically the process would involve having an ideation round where the designer or designers explore many different directions we could go, and then from those different ideas we'd kind of pick some and get clarity on what we really like and are responding to, and then pursue the versions of the ideas that we like. And typically there's around 3 rounds of iterations after we've kind of chosen the direction we want to go in. So we'd have plenty of opportunity for feedback. And then the last phase would be the deployment phase, where we create a new brand guide, we'd get the new logo files, we'd update the website and all the design assets, the letterhead, etc. So that's just a very brief overview of the overall process. And yeah, any questions on any of that?
No, I don't think so.
Great. Let's jump into what we like and dislike about the current logo. I think we've all identified some issues with the current logo. I could think of a few, but I would love to hear from the commissioners what your thoughts are about what we like about it and what we'd like to change.
I think he's asking for feedback. Does anyone?
Are you gonna put it up on the screen?
Is Rachel, is it possible for you to share your screen with that document I sent you earlier?
Yeah.
Jill?
Yeah, she's, I know, trying to do
Great.
that. It's also on the top of your agenda.
Yeah, Ravi, may I be recognized, Mr. Chair?
Pardon?
May I be recognized?
You are very recognized.
Here's,
Go ahead, Rachel.
well, here's the current logo screen. Did you all see that?
I think comments we've had so far are, what do those double ender designs mean? Because nobody around the table here seems to understand. And I think it was Sandy Yarmul who said, what's with the dream catcher? That's a Western phenomenon. That's not really a Wabanaki.
That's right. That's right, Bob. I've heard the same response, that the Dreamcatcher isn't Wabanaki of an origin, and that the double curves, we got a little bit of clarity on where those came from. Jill, I believe it was you, Jill, who found some emails from back in 2005 that kind of documented that this logo was created by students at UMO, and that there had originally been an intention to have more of a design competition for middle school and high school students in Maine, to help raise awareness of MITSC. And this was designed by UMO students. And when asked about the double curves, I believe it was Paul Bazulka, researched that a bit and found that they came from a history book, and that the interpretations of them were seemed to maybe have been made up by the author of that book. But there is some potential meaning associated with at least two of them. And there are actually notes at the bottom of this document that talk about that if we wanted to get into the history a little bit more. But does everyone agree that that the dream catcher is an element that we maybe don't want to hold on to?
It's actually Ojibwe. I did a little research.
Yeah, thank you, Jill.
Yeah, which are our relatives that we sent to the West during the migration after a prophecy that came to us. But yeah, but I mean, I personally, I get rid of all of it. But,
thanks, Bert.
You know, I mean, especially the one right in the middle. But anyway, but, yeah, I'm just joking, kind of. But yeah, I would basically, it needs to be a whole different design. You know, the like you know, was mentioned. You know, like a couple of those have certain significance. But thing is, you know, where does that come into play? To tell you the truth, I would think that we would, in regard to the Wabanaki, you know, the different nations of the Wabanaki would be represented as who we are in unity. Because, you know, that's the whole thing is you know, this tribal state commission, you know, it's supposed to be working between the Wabanaki people, Wabanaki nations, and the state of Maine. But, you know, to me, I think that first and foremost is the original territory is Wabanaki. And so that would take precedence, and then we can add a little bit of symbol somewhere for that other people. No, I know it's kind of hard to say. You know, there's seriousness to that, but at the same time, I kind of have no choice but to joke. You know, but I think that, you know, since the territory originally was, or, you know, has been, you know, historically, you know, Wabanaki territory, that should take precedence, and you know, first, and not to disregard our, you know, our neighbors, you know, who also inhabit the land now, you know, and try to do it in a respectful way as well. So, but I think that you know, we have a Confederacy symbol, and that, you know, but that's just my idea. You know, I would have to also look at my relatives, you know, to also agree with that, you know, because, you know, it also would be representative of them. Would that suffice in representation of our Wabanaki people, the different nations represented here?
Thank you, Bert. Thank
We're
you.
gonna be
Thank
doing
you for those
this.
comments.
All right, Robbie, are we gonna be doing this in depth at the retreat?
Yeah,
Those kinds of details.
we're gonna go into this in depth. So, Bert, thank you for those thoughts. And if anyone wants to share a quick thought about what they're looking for, not looking for, please do. But we can keep this short and go into greater detail at the retreat. Would you like to skip to the part where we do questions and next steps, and wait to get into what we like, just like what we're looking for in the future logo in greater detail at the retreat?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thoughts, questions? Next steps. I think the next step in my mind is the retreat and starting our discovery process then. besides that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can wrap things up if you'd like to move on to the next agenda item.
We're not far from the retreat. I think, you know, we can take what you have, and if you could send that out, send us the, you know, the steps you outlined. That would be helpful as well.
Will do, Newell. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question for the commissioners. You know, should there be an equivalent number of representations of the tribes in the state? You know, is that important to be even-handed?
It's very hard to think up a really appropriate logo for this, because anything you do just doesn't completely match up with something else.
Rachel had some ideas. Right here, you know, I think Sandy was, she was not crazy about having an outline of the state of Maine, because it looks like it's like swallowing up the tribes. Versus maybe a pine tree is representative of the state. Star, and then we talked about being people of the dawn, Wabanaki, so maybe there should be a sunrise on there. But just for moving, as we're thinking about it, they talked today about, you know, being neutral. So maybe trying to have equal number of representations.
People of the Dawn logo with a tiny little name on it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I didn't say that.
That was Newell.
Yes.
I'm kidding.
So,
And just think, I'll just talk about Bert's comment as well, like and I think yours, like the logo, the green catcher, right? So if you think about who we are, right, and where we are, we had the most erasure happen here as well. So, you know, that's not associated with us now, but maybe it was at one time. Right, but all of that stuff has been pushed out. You think about like the Sweat Lodge, which was outlawed at one time, right? People say, well, that's not here, that's out west, but it was here. So, you know, but that erasure that was happening hard back in, you know, the day, took its toll. So a lot of that stuff has been removed. Don't discount it, you know, just because it doesn't seem to be ours.
I guess, Rafi, I would like your thoughts when we get around to it is, you know, doing something that's consistent with the redesign of the web page. It looks amazing. And, you know, we've got certain typefaces and so on that, you know, have been selected before my time. So I just hope that's something that's consistent with, is adopted for that.
Absolutely, Jill. We made last time we refreshed the brand identity for MITSC was 2 years ago, and we took the logo and cleaned it up a bit. The original 2005 logo is at the bottom of that document. You can see it's a little bit jankier than the new one, but at the same time, we also worked on new typography and a color scheme, and that's all on the website, which I'm happy to share if anyone wants to see it quickly, but that will remain consistent. And if in developing the new logo, we introduce new colors, we might revisit the color scheme and revisit those things, but we will make sure it's all consistent across the brand. Absolutely. Any other thoughts or comments from people? Thank you so much, Bert and Newell and Jill, for sharing your thoughts.
I just have a real quick. I know we'll focus this in more detail at the retreat, but you know, I've shared this in the past, and I think it's worth mentioning. I think I would be very hesitant to use Wabanaki Confederacy symbol because of the reality that Wabanaki Confederacy is not just in the state of Maine. Wabanaki Confederacy is, you know, throughout extensive territory, throughout, you know, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Quebec, up to Newfoundland, to, you know, attempt to put the Wabanaki Confederacy logo within the state of Maine would just be, I don't think it would be appropriate. So, but no, that's just that's just me. So we just got to be tread carefully around that kind of symbols.
Thanks, Zeke. That's why I said have the Wabanaki logo with the state of Maine inside.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice.
Thank you, Zeke. Thank you to the commission for letting me join you today. I look forward to the work in September.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Rob.
And Ravi,
Bob? We have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, you want?
On fishing rules.
Fishing rules.
Well,
Update.
yeah, the quick update is that I think I've covered everything to date in emails. I think you're all familiar with the background of the not 25 years without updating our boundary waters fishing regulations. And in that time, we've developed discrepancies where the state DIF and W didn't even realize that MITSC thought it was regulating some of these boundary waters. And we've been working for a little over a year now with IF and W, or with our travel reps, with the tribal biologists, fisheries biologists. Everybody has agreed as volunteers to help us solve this problem. Meeting next 16th, what is that? Tuesday in Augusta. All of the state regional biologists will be in attendance, except one fellow, Frank Frost, from the northern region, has already paid a call on Sam St. John. Is here. And when I asked Sam for details, he said, Zeke knows all about this, so we can turn to him and ask for an update on what the state was up to. But to this point, this has been a very friendly, respectable, fun program. I just noticed recently that one of the ironies is because we haven't done anything to our rules in 25 years, the state now outlaws certain lead sinkers. We don't. So use all the lead you want to in these tribal waters, because these are the kinds of things that you got to go over every 25 years or they'll creep away. And say to meet as a group in Augusta with IFW. The agenda, which is here, I think on page 30 of materials, was actually prepared by Joe Overlock at IFW. And basically we're breaking it down into general and special, just like the fishing rule books. General will include those things like use of lead sinkers. Special will include those individual waters that you're probably familiar with, where you can have special length limits or all the bass you want. My solicitation to everybody on both sides has been, since we don't really have any other mechanism or infrastructure to build this around, all we've got to work on is consent and agreement. So you people, almost anything you can agree on between yourselves, we can make into a rule. Don't agree on it, well, we'll come back and start over again. Already started hearing little odds and ends. John Sewell is being deployed to fight Western fires. Says he's already met separately with the 3 regional biologists who now cover all the Passamaquoddy territory of the state. I don't know what he's being them, but they're talking. Like I think future years will become less and less necessary, and that all they have to do is publish the rules these people come up with. It is a study in what's now called co-management. And if Rena Newell is still there, yes, Chief Newell, you get part of the credit for this, even if you don't remember it, because when we were up visiting you in December of 23, it was bothering me then that we had these rule discrepancies. And you used the word co-management and the light went off for me and I said, that's how we do it. You don't have to pay anybody to do this. We can ask the state tribal fishermen and they'll probably volunteer. Or they have co-management is a term that covers a lot of ground. Is now the stated federal policy for PIA in their management of resources on land government holds in trust for native tribes. This is a little bit beyond that. This is the state tribal governments co-managing or co-shepherding resources that we literally share because they move back and forth between us. It's not like manganese deposits or something. So that's where we've been. That's where we're heading for. I'm optimistic that we will come out of this with a new set of consistent rules. State now has an online app called Float, fishing location, something or other. And if you go online, you can press your button and see what the rule is in a particular place, except it will show you what the state thinks the rule is, not what MITSC thought the rule is. Lucky and really make progress, we may be able to ride the state's nation coattail, so to speak, so that we don't have to publish our own brochure and so on. And finish up with noting that the first major regulatory filing is at page 32 of your materials. This is one of those things you never read. It comes in the newspaper and finds print about what some obscure agency is doing with rulemaking. This is the way the legislature keeps some control over the regulatory agencies. Is you must tell them in advance that a rulemaking campaign up. And then, of course, we have to let the whole public know that I assume we will actually produce some revised rules. That probably won't be until sometime next year, because we figure we're going to, sorry, let me start over again. The state is now moving to a process where every other year they extensively revise their rule book. Every in between year, they just do the sort of emergencies. They are now working on a major revamp. We expect to sort of follow them, shadow them as they go through this set of rules, and then for the 2026 rules, which will need to be done by the end of this year, hope to have our own dated amended rules in force in effect. Questions?
Looks like Rena has her hand up.
You're muted.
That happens all the time. Thank you, Bob. I have a question in regard just to clarification when you refer to IFW at the state level, is it the department? And what role does the advisory council for IF&W serve in this process? And I just want to mention to the commission that we do have a seat on the advisory council, and Penobscot tribal citizen John Neptune serves in that capacity.
That's an excellent question. I don't know to what extent the IF&W advisory board gets input on this. To the first question, yes, this is our opposite party in these negotiations is Department of IF&W. One of the, I guess, the third and last item on the agenda for next week is how the tribal biologists feel about the additions to state heritage water that the state is declaring another class of waters and fisheries they call heritage waters. I assume that is driven on their end by the advisory policy, but advisory board, but I don't know, and I suspect we're about to find out.
Okay. Willie?
Thank you for the original inspiration.
Yeah, Willie Wynn. the introduction of that concept, it was in the governor's chambers at a time, well, one of the times. I think they were discussing one of the dams and a decision in regards to the taking down of the dams, and there was some discussion between our environmental department and of course, state departments and that concept of co-management. Because we do share this land and the resources as well. So, yeah, Willie Winball.
I just add a couple things. The fishing rules only apply to the Penobscot and Passamaquoddy. And right now, it seems like both tribes are defaulting to the state. The exception of Penobscot has some regulations on 2 bodies of water. So right now, there's not a huge discrepancy because tribes have adopted the state laws as their own, or they've operated in default if they don't have their own rules. Penobscot's done a little bit more around sustenance. I think there's some provisions on that. I don't know if Passamaquoddy does. I asked for a copy of the rules, but I couldn't find any. So there's that.
And although we don't have jurisdiction over Meduxnicag, Palisades, they've been invited into the process just so that everybody will know what's going on, and I certainly expect they will get home rule privileges for too long in the future.
I did.
Everyone. Sorry, Joe. But Bob, to answer your question from earlier, give you, I guess, the summary of the meeting that we had here in HBMI. The reason why that meeting came about was because of the collaboration policy. They have a new collaboration lead, a liaison that they recently appointed to that position, and that liaison reached out to us and said, hey, would you like to we would like to come up and have a meeting with the folks up in HBMI. And we said okay. It seemed like a good time to have a discussion with them. It was our leadership in the room, and as well as our natural resources director. The main discussions were about implementing this new law that we have to pass hunting and fishing laws within our own territory. And we've been drafting those policies. They haven't been enacted yet, but we've created them. And we just wanted to touch base with IF&W to find out a couple points on their end and how in the past they have interacted with tribal governments, and it was a helpful discussion. So that's really what that conversation was about. We really didn't touch on boundary waters at all. We were really just talking about implementing the new hunting and fishing laws within our territory, and those policies are written, and right now they're being discussed in council, and should be up and running soon.
And maybe I was the only one who was questioning this, but I had asked Judd Estes Kendall to do some research on whether or not the Court of Appeals case, Penobscot Nation versus Fry, whether or not the Penobscot main stem was part of its territory, and did that change MITSC waters at all? And his memo is included in your materials at page 33. Read that. His conclusion, and I don't know if Bob, you had a chance to read it or not, was that MITSC does not have authority to regulate the main stem, that it would default to the state of Maine. And then the answer about sustenance fishing seems to be somewhat muddled, somewhat inconsistent based, because there's 2 definitions of the term reservation. And so it's kind of open for interpretation as to whether, the Penobscot Nation has that exclusive right to regulate, or whether that's something that the state has as well. Just recommend that if you're interested in that. I don't think this has any impact on passive audience.
No, although I'd be interested to know what water courses have been acquired. Here's some have been acquired since 1980.
Can I just comment, Noel?
Yes, please.
I know I'm just jumping in here, but I know, historically, and as a tribal citizen of Passamaquoddy, and a seasonal fisher person. So I just want to echo, and I'm sure I'm not saying anything that the commission isn't already aware of, but I know that this subject is very sensitive. Please, Joseph, jump in if I'm saying this incorrectly, but at least I can say that for Sabayak, when it comes to fishing, where Sabayak is located right on the water, and it's a very sensitive topic. So I'm not sure how far into the conversation MITSC has gone into this, but I just want to convey that. And just to keep it in mind, moving forward, that it's very, very sensitive area.
I am aware of that. Also on my personal agenda, that if it can be demonstrated that co-management works in freshwater, have statutory jurisdiction. It might be a transferable skill dealing with DMR in saltwater for the future.
That has not been addressed yet.
No,
Right.
no. First, I want to settle all the freshwater problems.
Yeah.
Jill, if I understood correctly, I think you said you couldn't find the Passamaquoddy fishing policies and regulations. I just wanted to share that it is on their website. I think it might have been Township or Sabayak, I forget, but in the creation of our policies, we looked at Passamaquoddies, we looked at Penobscots, and we found them on the website.
Joey just handed me a copy of them. So
Okay.
corrected. I did have a case when I was the judge there, and I was trying to think, well, where did I get the law from to apply? So, okay, I misspoke. I will look for them again.
Excuse me if I may continue and finish. And as part of sort of the ambient discussion on the formality, we're also getting into discussions about enforcement issues. Don Sewell said MITSC is regulating Mary Patush Pond while it's only 9 acres big, so it's not under our jurisdiction. And Joey has brought me up to date on enforcement issues affecting Crystal Lake. We will roll these all out the table.
Along those lines, is MITSC gonna issue its own licenses? Or does it want to give full faith and credit to state and tribal licenses? And then have they ever enforced our rules? Has anybody ever filed in tribal or state court? Where does it go?
I've asked.
And
I don't think we want to get into the licensing business. It's probably more trouble than it's worth. The less we have to do, the better. I don't want you, Rachel, having to answer a single phone call saying, what are the MITSC regulations?
yeah, we want fingerprints.
Because the MITSC stuff is specifically about 10 acres or bigger. It's anything under, especially on the reservation, is specifically to the tribes.
That's my understanding.
The issue that Bob's talking about that I brought up is there's some lands that we have where there's a body of water that's completely surrounded by tribal land. It is 10 acres or bigger, and state seems to be going out of their way to come into our territory to enforce laws when we have our own services to do. That was the thing that I proposed a while ago, because it's happened. They summon some tribal members. Listen, if they violate the law, they violate the law, but they should be working with us. They shouldn't be just coming in when there's always tension when stuff like that happens.
So if it's under 10 acres within tribal territory, it's the
It's
tribes.
the tribe.
But if it's over 10 acres, even though it's completely surrounded by Indian territory, it's MITSC. And do you like that? Does that make sense?
I've never liked it. But it's part of what the land claims settlement act had, and that's the part that always drove us crazy. Because there's some of the, Consulate, we've had that issue when we've come to hunting with the state. Coming in an area and pushing their weight around based on where we've shot these animals. Trying to push the jurisdiction when we say that's not fair, it's a move, got a moose in the water, hold on, hook a rope up, pull it out of the water, now you ain't even have to worry, because it's not in the water. I mean, they sometimes get a little too technical with that stuff, so that's the frustrating part that we've had dealing with that.
MITSC support an amendment that said that water that's wholly within Indian territory be under the tribes jurisdiction.
Certainly worth thinking about it. What cuts against that, though, I think, is the Great Ponds law, where every pond over 10 acres is available to everybody in the public, no matter who owns the shoreline. And carving out an exemption for tribal lands.
Newell?
It merits further discussion for sure. Yes.
Let's see what else we come up with.
Yes, Ms. Newell.
Willie one, I just want to, if we can discuss a little bit further, and again, I don't know what the discussion has been in the past. But I just heard a little bit about it, and I heard a little bit of frustration. And I've been in conversations, for the past like 5 years, right? When it comes to, there was a mention of DMR, there's mention of, saltwater fishing, and just response. And I've been in conversations that supported, really trying to emphasize mutual response. That being from the state, that being from the tribe. I think I come across that to really emphasize the need to have more conversations around mutual response. Joseph mentioned something about, some situations, and I think if there was more mutual, if it was a mutually established mutual response, I don't think some of these situations would potentially escalate. Again, we share this land, there may be jurisdictional divisions, so to speak, or overlaps, but I think we should really try to emphasize more conversations around mutual response and what that might look like. Blue one?
Yes, I've told Overlook at IFW that we should have these conversations at least every 25 years.
Yeah, I
Yes.
don't want to have to go through all that.
Right.
This on that last.
You got that last two. So we are running short on time. So we do have some detailed reports that went out in the packets, review it, well, let's see. Retreat agenda. Did that go out as well?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted some input on it.
And then, so if you have input on the retreat, send it out to Rachel?
Yep.
Or Jill?
Either, yep.
And or, how's that?
The one thing is that actually came up earlier was, we talked about adding a topic of how does the Alliance interface with MITSC? I wondered if that's something that you might want to consider at your meeting on that day.
It is, I'd like to, I try to get that to happen today a little bit.
Right.
But it didn't actually come out, but definitely bring that up at the retreat.
Yeah, I was getting the impression today that even chiefs maybe were interested in coming to the retreat and having that broader conversation. So maybe that could be during that meeting. But no, just-
Maybe it's good to invite them and have a time that the meeting that they,
Yeah,
if we say we'd like to have them there to discuss this amongst them.
yeah.
Yeah. Offer them lunch in an hour and a half or something like. I mean,
I don't know how much business we'll have, new business. This meeting, so you may hit agenda unless something coming up with the fishing.
Right.
So you could dedicate a big chunk of your meeting to that conversation.
well, that's definitely considerations. And we also had on the agenda today, review of work plans and staff activity reports. Again, those are in the packet, yes? And feel free to comment on those as well, or questions. And then one of the things we will just address a little bit is the state commissioners vacancies and what's going to transpire.
Yeah.
I did receive a response from my request to meet with the governor. I haven't had yet time to process it. I just received it yesterday. So, and I was invited to contact back Jerry Reed. Try and set something up, so. Not sure how that's gonna fall out, come out,
I'd be glad to
blackout,
join you if you want.
backup.
I'll be your backup.
There you go. Evolving.
Too long.
But we do need state commissioners. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? And I think there's a lack of, responsibility on the state's part to put commissioners in place. I think we said that in our letter as well. Lack of responsibility.
The response is not 100% accurate by any stretch,
No,
because this issue went on a year before any of that. We kept on pushing, so here we were telling them there was a problem that was coming up, because we were told in advance when these issues were all getting done. So they had a year. It wasn't like, oh, surprise, it was just a couple months. There was a year that we knew in advance that that was gonna happen.
and I don't remember a time when we had full state commissioners.
When I first started,
We did,
but it was shortly after that,
trickle them off.
yeah, when it stepping down, stepping back. They brought that up way before that.
When initially, what I'll do is I'm gonna meet with Jill. And just discuss the letter after I've had time to take it in. Will. And then come up with a plan and then run it by the commissioners as well. Including the independent commissioners.
I mean, I think it's, to me, it should be fair to share that letter to all the commissioners so they can see what.
Oh, yes, yeah, I'll forward that out.
Appreciate that.
Yep. Do you have any other? concerns,
That's most
comments?
helpful.
Or Jill? What's that?
It's like, we want to work with you. However, we want to say all these bad things about you, but we want to work.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's how I feel after reading it.
right. And our next meeting again is our retreat meeting in September, starting on Thursday night through Saturday. 13th, 14th, 15th.
Actually, I think it is the 12th, 13th, 14th. Unless I'm staring at
Let's
a
check.
calendar.
Yeah, Thursday is the 12th.
Yes, the 12th, 13th, and 14th,
You've got it
with the
as the
meeting
13th,
being the 13th.
Right.
So it's all correct in the
I
document.
understand.
I like Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
I was
Bring
born
it
I
on.
was born on Friday the 13th.
my daughter was born on Friday the
That says everything right
I
there.
know.
13th.
I encourage everybody to attend.
Encourage everybody to attend
Hunting season.
as well.
You may see me, you may not.
What?
Hello, everyone. Sorry to interrupt here. Just before we conclude for the day here, I just wanted to well, I was expecting it to come up, but there was a message Jill, you sent to the rest of us here about it was federal recognition of Powhatan Empire. I'm wondering if there's more information about that. I'm I mean, yeah, I got opinions to share, but is there a backstory behind there?
I like the word empire.
Yeah, I thought I sent that out.
You did,
Yeah.
put it out this morning.
And I don't know that it's up to you whether you want to respond. They only sent it to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But it's a notice of a petition. It's not a petition,
It's not something we have to act on.
right?
I think it's informational.
Where it's percolating out there. I
Okay.
think there's still criteria for recognition of this group wouldn't meet.
Yeah, my 2 cents is this is very, very far outside of MITSC's purview, and yeah,
Yeah.
we don't need to do anything about that.
We just know about
We
it.
got enough to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I wasn't gonna respond or anything, so that's good. Let me know that.
All right. Are we in adjournment?
Yeah, we don't have to vote.
Hold on just a second. I think Dave might want to say a couple of words.
Sure, I can talk for minutes, that's okay.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about my project, because I think I've met people over different months, but just to kind of remind folks, so I'm at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm from Portland. I'm interested in studying tribal state relations, which is why I'm here. And in terms of the research, I'm really interested in learning about what I see as kind of a momentum, if a slow momentum, but momentum nonetheless towards improving tribal state relations and relations more generally between non-Indigenous folks and Indigenous folks, all main home. And I'm really interested in, which is why this morning was so interesting for me, because I'm curious about the kind of different and diverse facets of folks doing this work. So whether it's advocacy or through legislative change or through educational outreach like Tributaries is doing, or kind of the truth-telling historical recovery that Donna Loring and Wabanaki Reach and her folks are doing. I'm interested in learning about the different facets and how they might be working together in kind of a movement towards progress and in terms of transforming this relationship. And I see obviously MITSC as a really important player in all of this, why I'm here, and I hope to keep kind of showing up to these meetings. You know, the websites and archives and documents are all really helpful, but I'm interested in, I think most of all, seeing roles and responsibilities of each entity as they play out, which is why, again, this conversation this morning was really fascinating to me. So kind of in a nutshell, what I'm interested in. One thing I'll mention is I'm trying to start interviewing folks, and I would love to interview any willing commissioners about maybe your trajectory in getting involved with MITSC, what you find most exciting about MITSC. No, like difficult questions. And that's all optional. And as I reach out to folks, I won't be offended if you don't respond. Everyone's very busy, but anyone who wants to chat further.
Thank you.
As long as the question is, what do you love about MITSC?
Yeah.
Are you just studying Maine or any other?
Yeah, but you made a really good comparative piece about Colorado, which I haven't looked into, but I'm curious about that too. But for the most part, just Maine.
Say UC Boulder or?
Yeah, Boulder. Yeah, I left Maine and then realized what's going on here. I didn't know about it. And so I kind of left and got interested in it, came back.
That's actually something that at the retreat we're gonna be looking at is, I think it says measuring success in tribal state relations, but I think it should really be measuring effectiveness, because that's what we're charged with. So like, how do we know we've been effective?
We have a definition for our state representatives.
What is their role anyway?
So can you bring in your JD next time?
I resigned from, had to resign from practicing in the state of Colorado because they were charging me like $400 a year to be on the inactive list. And so when you do that, you have to make a motion to the court, and I had to literally send my certificate in. That had the seal on it and everything. That was kind of hard because I had to take the bar exam out there to get that.
So if you wanted to go back, you would have to retake the bar?
I don't know, maybe I could do it by motion, but. Yeah, but that was pretty draconian. Give me your diploma.
Yeah,
$400 to stay on the list.
yeah,
Exactly.
inactive lists.
Yeah.
First got that anyways.
Robert, you still on the active list or?
No, I have what they call emeritus status. Means I can only practice pro bono.
Yeah.
That's my favorite kind of lawyer.
Pro bono.
See, I'm gonna hit you up.
Yeah.
I think they did, right? You did the brief on the case.
Yep, I don't get paid.
Great service.
All right, well, have safe travel, everyone.
Yes.
Did everyone see the potato blossoms coming up?
Yes.
Yeah, take a picture.
Was there a message between the lines there in Chief Newell's comments to me about sensitivity? Was she trying to tell me, you know, don't tread too soft, too quickly, or do a good job, or?
That's her.
That's
all right.
Yeah.
More details, please.
I think you've captured it, Bob.
Captured it.
Okay.
Diplomatic, Bob.
Mindful.
So should I stop the live stream?
Please.
I consider there are 3 tracks to this project. Political, scientific, and regulatory. Boy, the regulatory ride has been a good one.